Last week's episode of Lower Decks had us going to one of my favorite places in the entire Star Trek universe, the infamous Deep Space Nine space station where my favorite series took place. But in this week's episode, this actually has nothing to do with the Lower Deckers at all. We actually get a kind of cool Adventure Time episode. We get an off member who's not even a part of the main cast, and the whole episode just follows them around. So in today's episode, we actually get the return of a pretty funny character from, I believe, the season finale of the first season. So with all that, let's get right into it. Gannon here, back again with another one of my Star Trek reviews. Today we are going to be reviewing episode 7 of season 3 of Lower Decks, and today's episode was very fun. I read the episode previews like I usually do. The actress who voices Devon Attendy, I'm pretty sure she said that this is one of her favorite episodes ever, just because of how absolutely ridiculous it is. And like I said at the start, this episode follows the Lower Deckers like not at all. They are an extreme minority in this entire episode. This episode follows around a rather insignificant character who is not even a part of the main cast at all. This episode features the return of Peanut Hamper, the exo-comp that was featured in a couple episodes from season 1, probably like an episode and a half. I don't even know if I can even say a couple, but Peanut Hamper is an exo-comp, and exo-comps are these sentient robots that were from an episode of the TNG where Data goes to the space station, and then he learns that these exocomps, these little helpers that these scientists are using, are actually sentient beings capable of intelligence. So Data takes it upon himself to put other beings at risk to help save the exocomps, because it's just like a matter of principle, because he compares himself to the exocomps and sympathizes with them in some way. And now in Lower Decks, they make a joke of this by introducing that, you know, many years have passed, and so many years have passed that the exocomps have gone as far as to even be eligible to join Starfleet, which honestly, this would not happen if this wasn't Lower Decks. This is extremely silly. It's kind of an exaggeration, and it's almost poking fun at the fact that, you know, sometimes in Trek we're introduced to an alien species and then we have a little bit of a time skip. Maybe we're in a different series and that particular species becomes a lot more friendly and a lot more cooperative and maybe even a member of the Federation at that point. So basically, Peanut Hamper is this hilarious exocomp from season 1. Peanut Hamper's whole shtick is that while Peanut Hamper appears helpful, and while exocomps are almost like typically a common trait that they have is that they're very sacrificial, like they're very willing to practice self-sacrifice if it means helping others, especially other exocomps, so they do have a very strict sense of empathy, but Peanut Helper does not have that at all. Peanut Helper is an absolute menace. Nobody likes Peanut Helper, and at the end of season 1, Peanut Helper was supposed to be the one to save everybody, to do this act of self-sacrifice, but in an act of hilarity. Peanut Hamper was literally like, screw you guys, I'm going home. We actually get to see what happened to Peanut Hamper when she jumped ship and left the Cerritos in the Lower Deckers to essentially die. Actually, the last time that we actually saw Peanut Hamper was when she was leaving the Lower Deckers in the Cerritos to die at the hand of Drukmani scavengers at the end of season 1. And now, at the beginning of this episode, we actually get to see what happened, and we got to see Peanut Hamper kind of drifting in space, and there was a little bit of a reference to Castaway. Peanut Hamper created her own little, like, Wilson exocomp, and created an actual whole warp nacelle from scraps.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave! With a box of scraps!
That was able to propel her far enough to get to a planet where she settled down. This Class M planet is absolutely hilarious. It is a great addition to the Star Trek universe. It is filled with an avian race known as the Arior. The name of the planet is like Areolis, which sounds like very close to areola. I think Boimler even kind of makes a joke about that on the small bridge scene that we get to see in this episode. It is very, very cool how little of Lower Decks cast we actually get to see in this episode. It is very much focused on Peanut Helper and also focused on teaching us about the Arior. The Arior are really the highlight of this episode. from the very beginning to the end. They're clearly the funniest part. Peanut Hampers found by the village elder of the Arior, who is treating Peanut Hamper with a lot of respect, considering that it is kind of like a sentient alien robot being to a society that's not used to seeing aliens at all. The village elder says that Peanut Hamper is the first visitor ever. So the village elder, I do not really remember his name, nor is it that important, because the more important character is the village elder's son, which is, his name is Rauda. This giant buff bird, and it reminds me of like the buff Birdman from Rick and Morty. This scene and this episode also very much reminds me of One Piece during the time skip. All of the Straw Hats are kind of sent and separated to separate islands where they have to spend 2 years there, train up so that they could actually come back together and be a strong, competent pirate crew, and they're not getting beat on. But one of the crew members, Chopper, gets sent to this kind of primitive avian planet, and very much reminiscent of what is going on with Peanut Hamper. And while the, Chopper got sent to an island with giant birds and like cavemen, Peanut Hamper over here is actually sent to a planet where everything flies, like not just the bird people who are owls and ravens, but even their livestock, their pigs, goats, everything flies on this planet. Another thing that this really reminded me of is the avian Xindi species. Now, I'm pretty sure there was like an avian Xindi skull referenced in Lower Decks before, but I very much think it would be like the coolest thing if Star Trek revisited the Xindi and did an episode where they found some avians who were still alive. It would be finding some of the last remaining Dwemer in Skyrim. I feel like that would be so cool, and if I were to ever create my own Star Trek series, you could bet that that's like one of the episodes I would have to write. I just believe that there's a lot of very cool species that you could revisit and make great episodes on. The Xindi especially, why we never gone back to the Xindi at all. Like, I know the amount of content made after Enterprise doesn't really permit that, but I would really like to see that. Arior are very cool. Like I mentioned, they have just basically everything flying on their planet. They have these dragons that fly through the sky and bite the village people and kill them, and they call them sky snakes. Peanut Hamper makes a joke about how that doesn't make any sense. If everything can fly, wouldn't they just be called snakes? And I thought that was pretty funny. The Arior are actually pretty cool in the way that they used to be a spacefaring species. Now, I'm pretty sure there are 1 to 2 other alien species that have been like this in Trek. For instance, there was that one in the one TNG movie, like the first one they made, Insurrection, where they seemed like they were just kind of a primitive, non-warp capable species and they were observing them, but when Picard and them actually made first contact, you learn that, hey, we used to be a warp capable species, and like, you're spying on us, that's like super lame. We totally know what you're up to. So basically, the Arior have ships in a whole evidence of like a warp capable society underground, but that technology kind of led them to ruin, so now they've adopted a more tribal lifestyle where they live in the trees like Ewoks. So basically, Peanut Hamper, the big twist of the episode is that, it really seems like Peanut Hamper is warming up to this people, learning the values of self-sacrifice, of empathy, through her interaction with the Arior. And one of the more ridiculous things is she actually has like a love arc and falls in love and makes love to Raudon, the village elder's son, which is just like a freaking hilarious moment. But she like evilly makes a distress call to call the Drukbani over to the planet to fuck everything up. Also says that she could like make a distress call and get the attention of the Cerritos, and she like stages this whole thing. You basically essentially learn at the end of the episode that Peanut Hamper is probably the greatest villain in Star Trek Lower Decks to date. Like, she is absolutely maniacal. She is evil. No room for growth with Peanut Hamper. She is just an absolute prick. Just a dick. Nothing redeemable. But damn, is she funny. Absolutely hilarious episode out of Star Trek Lower Decks today. I absolutely loved it. And while I really liked Peanut Hamper, I liked how they had like a whole Tree Trunks Adventure Time episode where they kind of take an insignificant cast member and make a whole episode about them. I feel like another good opportunity maybe would be to make one about either Badgie or Dr. Miggly Moo. Like, either of those two characters getting their own episodes would be very cool. I still want to see an episode, a disaster, and everybody gets locked out of the bridge except for like a couple of the lower deckers in Dr. Migley-Moo, and Dr. Migley-Moo then becomes the senior ranking officer on the ship, and I want him to like actually do some bridge command. I feel like that would be a great episode. But anyways, that was my review of Star Trek Lower Decks episode 7 season 3. It has a very annoyingly long name. I don't even know if I could remember it right now. But I actually really did enjoy that episode. Didn't really need to rely on a whole bunch of Star Trek references. In fact, we just got introduced to some new Star Trek content today in the form of the Arior, a very cool avian Star Trek species, and we definitely need more of those. Considering the fact that the Xindi bird species are dead, we do have Dr. Migley-Moo species, and then we have the butterfly people from Star Trek Discovery. What the fuck are those? What are those? But yeah, I really enjoyed today's episode. I'm gonna give it like a 7 out of 10. That's how much I just thought it was a pretty good, healthy, funny, great, entertaining episode. If you're enjoying any of the content that you see on my channel, I'd be very flattered if you were to subscribe. Once we get to 10K subscribers, I'm going to cosplay as a Star Trek Xenos, and I'm going to film a pretty fun video out in public, probably pestering people a little bit. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe. Please leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. I read every comment. They are my favorite thing about this platform, so please do that. And with all that being said, I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Live long and prosper.
Can I subscribe?